The morning sun cast long shadows across the Navy's Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California. Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison had seen thousands of recruits come through these gates over his 15-year career with the SEALs. Some came in cocky, others came in scared, but very few came in the way Sarah Chun did that Tuesday morning in March 2019. Sarah stepped out of the government sedan with a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing maybe 125 pounds soaking wet, she looked more like she belonged in a computer lab than on a military training ground. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes took in everything around her with the kind of intensity that made seasoned operators take notice. Morrison watched from his office window as she made her way to the check-in building. The other SEALs in the compound had already started their morning whispers. Word traveled fast in the tight-knit community, and everyone knew that today marked the beginning of something unprecedented. Sarah Chun was not just any recruit. She was the first woman to be officially invited to attempt the Navy SEAL training program. The path that led Sarah to this moment had begun 3 years earlier in Afghanistan. She had been serving as a Navy intelligence specialist, attached to a SEAL team conducting counterterrorism operations in Helmand Province. Her official role was to analyze communications intercepts and provide real-time intelligence to the operators. But war has a way of throwing the rulebook out the window. During a particularly dangerous mission to capture a high-value target in a Taliban stronghold, Sarah's team found themselves pinned down by heavy enemy fire. The team's communications specialist had been wounded in the initial assault, and their radio equipment damaged. Without communications, the 12-man SEAL team was effectively cut off from air support and extraction. Sarah had volunteered to crawl through 200 meters of open ground under enemy fire to reach a position where she could establish contact with their command post. It was not her job. It was not what she had trained for. But it was what needed to be done. Lieutenant Commander Michael Torres, the team leader, would later describe those 30 minutes as some of the longest of his military career. He watched through his scope as Sarah low-crawled across the rocky terrain, bullets kicking up dirt around her, her small frame barely visible against the brown landscape. She reached the elevated position and managed to establish communications just as the Taliban fighters began to surround their location. The air support she called in arrived with minutes to spare, turning the tide of the battle and allowing the team to complete their mission and extract safely. But it was not just her courage under fire that impressed the SEAL operators. During the 3 months she spent attached to their unit, Sarah consistently demonstrated tactical awareness that surprised even veteran operators. She could read terrain like a map, anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy, and maintain her composure under pressure in ways that many seasoned soldiers struggled to match. When Lieutenant Commander Torres submitted his after-action reports, he included a recommendation that would change Sarah's life forever. He suggested that she be considered for special operations training. The recommendation wound its way up through the chain of command, eventually landing on the desk of Admiral Patricia Williams, the first woman to serve as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations. Admiral Williams had been fighting her own battles for gender equality in the military for over 2 decades. She saw in Sarah's record something that could not be ignored. Here was a sailor who had proven herself in combat alongside some of the military's most elite warriors. The question was not whether she deserved a chance, but whether the institution was ready to give her one. The decision to allow women into SEAL training had been debated in the highest levels of the Pentagon for years. Critics argued that the physical standards were too demanding, that unit cohesion would suffer, and that the training was simply not designed for female participants. Supporters countered that if women could meet the same standards as men, they deserved the same opportunities. Sarah's combat record provided the perfect test case. She had already proven herself under fire. She had already earned the respect of active SEAL operators. If anyone could succeed in the program, it would be someone like her. The decision was made in a closed-door meeting in the Pentagon in January 2019. Sarah would be given the opportunity to attempt the full SEAL training program, from basic underwater demolition/SEAL training through advanced operator courses. She would be held to exactly the same standards as her male counterparts. No accommodations would be made, no standards would be lowered. Sarah learned of her selection while stationed at Naval Station Norfolk. The call came from Captain Jennifer Hayes, the Navy's Director of Special Operations Programs. The conversation was brief and to the point. Petty Officer Chun, you have been selected to attend basic underwater demolition/SEAL training beginning March 15th. This is a voluntary program. You have 72 hours to decide if you want to accept. Sarah did not need 72 hours. She did not even need 72 minutes. I accept, ma'am. The weeks leading up to her departure for Coronado were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah increased her already intense fitness regimen, focusing on the swimming, running, and calisthenics that would form the foundation of SEAL training. She studied every piece of available literature on the program, memorizing the performance standards and training schedules. But, perhaps most importantly, she prepared mentally for what she knew would be the most challenging experience of her life. SEAL training was designed to break people. The attrition rate hovered around 75%, meaning that 3 out of every 4 people who started the program would not finish it. Sarah had no illusions about what she was walking into. She knew that she would be under a microscope, that every failure would be magnified, and that every success would be questioned. She knew that some of her instructors and fellow trainees would want her to fail, not necessarily out of malice, but out of a genuine belief that women did not belong in special operations. She also knew that she was not just representing herself. She was representing every woman who had ever dreamed of serving in special operations, and every woman who would come after her. The weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and motivating. As she packed her gear the night before leaving for California, Sarah thought about the conversation she had had with her father the previous weekend. David Chun had served as an Army Ranger in Vietnam, and he understood better than most what his daughter was about to face. You know it's going to be harder for you than for anyone else, he had told her as they sat on the porch of her childhood home in Oregon. I know, Dad. They're going to try to break you. They're going to push you harder than they push anyone else. And when you push back, some of them are going to resent you for it. I know. But if you can make it through, if you can prove that you belong there, you'll change everything. Not just for yourself, but for every woman who comes after you. Sarah had nodded, understanding the full weight of his words. She was not just trying to become a Navy SEAL. She was trying to open a door that had been closed for over 50 years. Now, standing in the California sunshine with her duffel bag and her dreams, Sarah took a deep breath and walked toward the building where she would begin the most important journey of her life. Master Chief Morrison watched her disappear through the entrance and shook his head. In his 15 years with the teams, he had seen the toughest men in the military broken by the training program. He had watched college football players quit in the first week and marathon runners ring the bell after their first cold water evolution. But there was something different about the way Sarah Chun carried herself. Something in the set of her shoulders and the steadiness of her gaze that made him think that maybe, just maybe, the SEALs were about to learn something new about what it meant to be tough. The other instructors had already made their opinions known. Some were skeptical, others were openly hostile, and a few were cautiously optimistic. But they all agreed on one thing. The next 6 months were going to be unlike anything any of them had experienced before. Sarah completed her check-in process and was assigned to Class 329, a group of 32 candidates who would begin their training journey together. As she made her way to the barracks where she would spend the next phase of her life, she could feel the eyes of every person on the base following her. In the distance, she could hear the sound of instructors shouting commands and trainees responding with crisp acknowledgments. The smell of salt air mixed with diesel fuel and the rhythmic sound of boots on pavement filled her senses. This was it. This was where she would either achieve her dream or discover her limits. Sarah Chun had come a long way from that intelligence post in Afghanistan, where she first proved herself to a team of Navy SEALs. Now she was about to find out if she could become one of them. The journey ahead would test every aspect of her physical and mental strength, but she was ready. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life, even when she did not know it was possible. Every early morning run, every hour in the gym, every moment of discomfort she had pushed through had been preparation for what lay ahead. The alarm clock rang at 04:45 hours, 15 minutes before the official wake-up call. Sarah had learned during her time in Afghanistan that being early was one of the few advantages she could give herself in a world where physical size and strength often mattered more than preparation and determination. She was already dressed and standing at attention beside her rack when Instructor Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams burst through the barracks doors at exactly 0500 hours, his voice booming across the large room filled with 32 bunks. "Good morning, ladies. I hope you got your beauty sleep because today we find out who wants to be here and who's just wasting my time." Chief Williams was a legend in the SEAL community. At 6 feet 2 inches and 210 pounds of pure muscle, he had completed 4 combat deployments and held the record for the fastest completion of Hell Week in the past decade. His reputation for being tough but fair had made him one of the most respected instructors in the program. As the trainees filed out for their first physical training session, Sarah caught Williams watching her with the kind of intense scrutiny she had grown accustomed to receiving. She met his gaze directly, neither challenging nor submissive, just ready. The morning physical training session took place on the beach adjacent to the training compound. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to the horizon, its cold waters waiting to test every candidate who hoped to earn the SEAL Trident. "Today we establish baseline fitness levels," Chief Williams announced as the class formed up in ranks on the sand. "You will complete a timed 4-mile run on the beach, followed by maximum repetition push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. These scores will determine your initial standing in the class." Sarah knew that this first test would set the tone for everything that followed. The other candidates would be watching to see if she could keep up, and the instructors would be looking for any sign that she did not belong. The run began at a pace that immediately separated the class into groups. The former college athletes and military fitness enthusiasts took an early lead, while others settled into more conservative paces designed to ensure they finished within the time limit. Sarah positioned herself in the middle of the pack, matching her stride to candidates who appeared to be strong runners. She had learned from her father, the former Army Ranger, that the key to success in military training was to never show all your cards at once. "Pace yourself," he had told her during one of their training runs in Oregon. "Let them underestimate you until it matters. Then, show them what you can really do." The sand made every step more difficult than running on pavement, and the cool morning air carried salt spray from the ocean waves that crashed just yards away from the running path. Sarah focused on her breathing and her form, keeping her shoulders relaxed and her stride efficient. By the 2-mile mark, several candidates were already struggling. The pace had taken its toll, and the soft sand was sapping energy from even the strongest runners. Sarah, however, was just getting warmed up. She had been running competitively since high school, and her smaller frame was actually an advantage on the challenging beach terrain. While larger candidates fought to maintain their footing in the deep sand, Sarah's lighter weight allowed her to maintain better traction and efficiency. As they approached the 3-mile marker, Sarah noticed that the lead group was starting to slow down. The initial fast pace was catching up with them, and their form was beginning to deteriorate. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Sarah gradually increased her pace, moving from the middle of the pack toward the front. Her breathing remained controlled, her stride stayed smooth, and her focus intensified. One by one, she passed candidates who had started ahead of her. Chief Williams, who was monitoring the run from various positions along the course, noticed Sarah's move toward the front of the pack. He had been expecting her to struggle with the physical demands of the training, but what he was seeing challenged his assumptions. With half a mile remaining, Sarah was running in 4th place, behind 3 candidates who had been college track athletes. The lead runner, Tom Bradley, had been a Division I cross-country runner at the University of Colorado. 2nd place belonged to Mike Rodriguez, a former Marine who had competed in military fitness competitions. 3rd place was held by James Park, a triathlete who had joined the Navy specifically to become a SEAL. As they entered the final quarter mile, Sarah made her decision. She had been holding back, waiting to see what the competition would offer. Now it was time to find out what she was really capable of. Her pace increased again, this time more dramatically. Her smaller frame, which some had seen as a disadvantage, now worked in her favor as she maintained perfect running form, while the larger candidates around her began to struggle with fatigue. She passed James Park with 200 meters to go. His surprised expression told her that he had not expected to be overtaken by the only woman in the class. She passed Mike Rodriguez 50 meters later, his heavy breathing indicating that his early fast pace had cost him dearly. That left only Tom Bradley, the college cross-country runner who had built what seemed like an insurmountable lead. But Sarah had been studying his form throughout the run, and she could see that he was tiring. His stride was shortening, his arms were tightening up, and his pace was beginning to falter. With 50 meters to go, Sarah pulled alongside Bradley. For a moment, they ran stride for stride, neither giving an inch. The finish line was clearly visible ahead, and every candidate behind them was pushing hard to close the gap. In those final 50 meters, Sarah drew on every training run she had ever completed, every moment of pain she had pushed through, and every person who had ever told her she was not strong enough or fast enough to compete at this level. She found an extra gear that surprised even her, pulling ahead of Bradley in the final 20 meters and crossing the finish line a full 3 seconds ahead of the former Division I athlete. The beach fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing and ocean waves. Sarah had not just completed the run, she had won it. She had beaten 31 men, including several who had been college athletes and military fitness specialists. Chief Williams checked his stopwatch twice, not quite believing what he had recorded. Sarah's time was not just fast for a woman or fast for someone her size. It was fast, period. It was a time that would have been competitive in any SEAL training class in the program's history. The push-up test that followed produced similar results. While the larger candidates relied on upper body strength, Sarah's technique was flawless. Her form never wavered, her pace never slowed, and when time was called, she had completed more repetitions than all but 2 of her classmates. The sit-up test played to her strengths even more. Her core strength, developed through years of focused training, allowed her to maintain a pace that exhausted candidates who outweighed her by 60 pounds or more. Again, she finished in the top 3. The pull-up test was where many expected her to struggle. Upper body strength was traditionally seen as a male advantage, and the pull-up bar showed no mercy to anyone who lacked the necessary power to lift their body weight repeatedly. Sarah approached the bar with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout the morning. Her grip was precise, her form was textbook, and her first few repetitions were smooth and controlled. As the count increased, other candidates began to struggle and drop off the bar. Sarah's smaller frame meant she had less weight to lift, but it also meant she had less muscle mass to generate the necessary power. The test became a battle between efficiency and strength. At 15 repetitions, only 5 candidates remained on the bar. At 20, that number dropped to 3. Sarah, Tom Bradley, and Mike Rodriguez were locked in a battle of wills, each pulling their body weight above the bar with increasingly difficult movements. At 25 repetitions, Mike Rodriguez's grip gave out, and he dropped from the bar. That left only Sarah and Tom Bradley, the same 2 who had battled at the finish line of the run. The crowd of candidates and instructors had grown quiet again, watching as these 2 very different athletes pushed each other to their limits. Bradley's superior upper body strength was offset by the additional weight he had to lift. Sarah's technique remained perfect even as fatigue began to show in her face. At 30 repetitions, both candidates were clearly struggling. Their movements had slowed, and their breathing was labored. But neither showed any sign of giving up. At 35 repetitions, Tom Bradley's form began to break down. His pull-ups became more like half repetitions as fatigue overwhelmed his technique. Sarah, however, maintained her strict form. Each repetition a complete range of motion from full extension to chin clearing the bar. The end came suddenly, at repetition 38. Bradley's grip finally failed, and he dropped from the bar, his face showing a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Sarah, somehow, was still hanging on. She completed 2 more perfect repetitions before carefully dropping from the bar, having established not just a class record, but a new training facility record for the pull-up test. The previous record of 39 repetitions had stood for over 10 years. Chief Williams stood in stunned silence, looking at high 3 weeks into basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. The initial shock of Sarah's record-breaking performance had settled into a new reality for Class 329. The woman they had expected to struggle was consistently finishing at the top of every physical evolution, and her presence had fundamentally changed the dynamics of the training environment. The candidates had been divided into boat crews of 7 members each, and Sarah found herself assigned to boat crew 5 alongside Tom Bradley, the runner she had defeated on that first day. The crew also included Mike Rodriguez, the former Marine, James Park, the triathlete, David Kim, a former college football player, Marcus Johnson, a Navy surface warfare officer, and Alex Thompson, a former pararescueman from the Air Force. Their boat was a standard inflatable boat, small, IBS, that weighed 289 pounds when dry and significantly more when soaked with cold Pacific Ocean water. The 7-person crews were required to carry these boats everywhere they went, from the training compound to the beach, through obstacle courses, and during the dreaded surf passage, evolutions that tested their ability to navigate through breaking waves. On this particular Wednesday morning, Chief Williams had announced that the day's training would focus on teamwork and leadership under stress. Each boat crew would be required to complete a series of timed evolutions, with the slowest crew facing additional physical training as motivation to improve their performance. Today we find out who can lead and who can follow, Chief Williams announced as the crews formed up on the beach. Each crew will rotate leadership every 30 minutes. The crew leader is responsible for their team's performance, and their team is responsible for the leader's success. Sarah knew that this evolution would be particularly challenging for her. Physical performance was one thing, but leadership in a military environment required earning the respect and confidence of team members who might question whether a woman could effectively lead men in combat situations. The first rotation put Tom Bradley in charge of boat crew 5. His experience as a college athlete and natural leadership abilities made him a logical choice to set the standard for the crew. Under his leadership, they completed their first evolution, a 2-mile beach run with the boat carried overhead, in excellent time. Mike Rodriguez took over for the second evolution, a series of surf passages that required precise timing and coordination to navigate the boat through breaking waves without capsizing. His Marine Corps experience and aggressive leadership style drove the crew to a strong performance, though not without some heated exchanges when crew members struggled to maintain the pace he demanded. When Sarah's turn came to lead the third evolution, she could sense the hesitation in some of her crew members. The task was an obstacle course navigation with the boat, requiring the crew to carry their 289-pound burden through a series of barriers, under wire obstacles, and over walls while maintaining a fast pace. "All right, crew," Sarah said as they prepared for the evolution. "We've been performing well, but I think we can do better. David and Marcus, you're our strongest guys, so you're going to anchor the front and back of the boat. Tom and Mike, you'll be on the right side, James and Alex on the left. I'll be free-floating to help wherever we need extra push." David Kim, the former football player, looked skeptical. "No offense, Chun, but you're about 100 pounds lighter than anyone else here. Maybe you should stay in a fixed position where we can compensate." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I appreciate the concern, David, but I've studied the course, and there are 3 choke points where we're going to need dynamic adjustment. Trust me on this one." The evolution began with the crew carrying the boat at a fast jog toward the first obstacle, a series of wooden barriers 4 feet high that they would need to navigate while maintaining control of their unwieldy load. Sarah ran alongside the boat, studying the crew's performance and looking for ways to optimize their efficiency. At the first barrier, she immediately saw the problem. The crew was lifting the boat too high, wasting energy and creating instability. "Lower the lift," she called out. "We only need 18 inches of clearance. Save your energy for the wire crawl." Her quick adjustment allowed them to navigate the barriers faster than any previous crew, but the real test came at the second obstacle, a 50-meter section where they had to low-crawl under barbed wire while dragging the boat behind them. This was where Sarah's strategy of free-floating proved its value. While the 6 men struggled to maintain coordination while crawling on their stomachs, Sarah was able to move around the formation, pushing the boat from different angles to maintain momentum and prevent it from getting caught on the wire obstacles. Chen's like a border collie herding sheep, Alex Thompson muttered as Sarah appeared beside him to help push the boat over a particularly difficult wire section. Less talking, more crawling, Sarah called back. But there was humor in her voice that kept the crew's morale high even as the physical demands of the evolution pushed them to their limits. The third and most challenging obstacle was a 12-foot wall that required the crew to lift their boat overhead and pass it over while all 7 members climbed the wall themselves. This was where brute strength typically determined success or failure, and where Sarah's smaller stature could become a liability. But Sarah had been thinking about this obstacle since the moment Chief Williams announced the evolution. As they approached the wall, she called out her plan. David and Marcus, you're going up first. Tom and Mike, you'll boost the boat up to them. James and Alex, you'll push from the bottom. I'm going to coordinate the timing and make sure we don't lose the boat on the transfer. What about getting yourself over the wall? Mike asked as they positioned themselves for the lift. Don't worry about me. Focus on the boat. Once it's over, I'll be right behind you. The execution was flawless. The 2 strongest crew members reached the top of the wall and positioned themselves to receive the boat. The middle 4 members lifted the boat with perfect timing, passing it up to their teammates while Sarah moved around the group, calling out timing cues and making small adjustments to ensure the transfer went smoothly. Once the boat was safely over the wall, Sarah faced her own challenge. At 5 feet 4 inches, the 12-foot wall required her to make a running jump just to reach the top edge. But years of rock climbing and gymnastics had prepared her for exactly this kind of obstacle. She took a 10-meter running start and leaped, catching the top of the wall with both hands, and immediately beginning the pull-up motion that would get her over. The crew, already on the other side with the boat, watched in amazement as she smoothly pulled herself up and over the wall, landing lightly on her feet beside them. Damn, Chun, David Kim said, shaking his head. Where did that come from? Rock climbing, Sarah replied with a grin. My dad made me learn when I was 10. Said it would teach me that there's always a way up if you're willing to work for it. The final section of the obstacle course was a sprint to the finish line, and Boat Crew 5's efficient navigation of the obstacles had given them a significant lead over the other crews. They crossed the finish line a full 30 seconds ahead of the second-place crew, establishing a new course record in the process. As the crew set down their boat and caught their breath, Chief Williams approached with his ever-present clipboard and stopwatch. His expression was unreadable, but Sarah could see him making notes about their performance. Outstanding time, Crew 5, he announced. Chun, your leadership during that evolution was textbook. You identified your crew's strengths, adapted your strategy to the obstacles, and maintained team cohesion under pressure. Well done. The praise from Chief Williams carried extra weight because of his reputation for being sparing with compliments. For him to single out Sarah's leadership was significant, and she could see the impact it had on her crew members. Thanks, Chief, Sarah replied. But this was a team effort. Everyone executed perfectly. Over the following hours, as each crew member took their turn leading different evolutions, a pattern began to emerge. Under Sarah's leadership, Boat Crew 5 consistently performed better than their average, not because she was physically stronger than her teammates, but because she was able to see solutions that others missed. During a surf passage evolution led by James Park, Sarah suggested a different approach to reading the wave patterns that allowed them to time their entry more effectively. When Alex Thompson led a timed beach run, Sarah identified a route along the harder-packed sand near the waterline that shaved precious seconds off their time. By the end of the training day, Boat Crew 5 had established themselves as the top-performing crew in the class, and Sarah's contributions to their success were undeniable. But, more importantly, she had earned something that could not be measured by stopwatches or scoreboards, the genuine respect of her teammates. That evening, as the crew sat together during the brief free time before lights out, David Kim brought up what everyone was thinking. You know, when I first heard we were getting a woman in our class, I figured she'd be gone in the first week, he admitted. No offense, Chun. I just didn't think anyone could keep up with this pace. None taken, Sarah replied. I had the same concerns. But you're not just keeping up, Tom Bradley added. You're making the rest of us better. That obstacle course today, I never would have thought of half the adjustments you made. Mike Rodriguez, the former Marine who had initially been the most skeptical about having a woman in the class, nodded his agreement. In the Corps, we had a saying, every Marine is a rifleman. But there was another part to it that people don't always remember. Every Marine is also responsible for making the Marines around them better. That's what you're doing here. Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the physical hell week began on a Sunday night in April with the sound of machine gun fire, explosive simulators, and instructors screaming commands through bullhorns. Sarah had been preparing for this moment since the day she accepted her invitation to SEAL training. But nothing could truly prepare anyone for the reality of 5.5 days with only 4 hours of sleep total. The official start came at 2,200 hours when Chief Williams and his instructor team stormed into the barracks with enough noise and chaos to wake the dead. Smoke filled the building as candidates scrambled to get dressed and form up outside in the cold night air. Welcome to Hell Week. Chief Williams roared over the continuing sound effects. For the next 5 days, you will be cold, wet, sandy, and tired. Some of you will quit. Some of you will get injured. Some of you will discover that you don't have what it takes to be a Navy SEAL. The question is, which one will you be? Class 329 had started with 32 candidates. 3 weeks of training had already eliminated 6, bringing their number down to 26. By tradition, Hell Week would cut that number in half or more. Only the strongest, most determined candidates would survive to continue their journey toward earning the SEAL Trident. Sarah stood in formation with the rest of her class, her body already shivering from the combination of cold ocean air and nervous energy. She had studied every piece of available literature about Hell Week, spoken with veterans who had completed it, and trained specifically for the physical and mental challenges ahead. But she also knew that she would face unique pressures that no other candidate would experience. The world was watching to see if a woman could survive what many considered the ultimate test of military toughness. Media outlets had stationed reporters outside the base perimeter, and Pentagon officials were receiving daily briefings on her progress. The first evolution was a beach run that would continue until sunrise, approximately 8 hours of running on soft sand, while carrying boats, logs, and other equipment. It was designed to exhaust the candidates before the real testing began. Boat Crew 5 had developed a rhythm over the previous 3 weeks that served them well during the long night run. They rotated positions regularly to prevent any one person from bearing an unequal share of the load, and Sarah's endurance training proved invaluable as the hours passed, and other candidates began to struggle. By 0400 hours, 3 candidates had already rung the bell that signaled their withdrawal from training. The brass bell sat on a post near the instructor platform, and ringing it 3 times was the traditional way to voluntarily terminate training. Each time someone rang the bell, the instructors would announce it to the entire class, and the psychological pressure on the remaining candidates would increase. Candidate Martinez has decided he doesn't want to be a SEAL. Chief Williams announced over his bullhorn as the 4th candidate of the night rang the bell. Anyone else want to join him? The medical tent is warm, and there's hot coffee and donuts waiting for quitters. Sarah felt the temptation just like everyone else. Her feet were raw with blisters. Her shoulders ached from carrying equipment, and the cold ocean spray had left her clothing soaked and her body temperature dropping. But every time she considered the possibility of quitting, she remembered the conversation with her father and the weight of responsibility she carried. The sunrise brought no relief, only a change of scenery as the class moved to the obstacle course for what the instructors called a light warm-up. The obstacle course that had seemed challenging during regular training now felt impossibly difficult with already exhausted muscles and sleep-deprived minds. It was during the rope climb that Sarah faced her first serious crisis of Hell Week. The 30-foot rope was wet from the morning dew, making it slippery and difficult to grip. Her hands, already raw from hours of carrying equipment, began to slip as she attempted to climb. Halfway up the rope, her grip failed completely, and she fell, hitting the sand below with enough force to knock the wind out of her lungs. The fall itself was not dangerous. The sand was designed to cushion such impacts. But the psychological effect was devastating. "Get up, Chun," one of her boat crew teammates shouted. "You've got this." But as Sarah lay in the sand, gasping for air, she felt doubt creeping into her mind for the first time since training began. Her hands were bleeding. Her body was already pushed beyond what she thought were her limits. And this was only the first day of 5. Chief Williams appeared beside her, his voice cutting through the chaos of the training evolution. "You can stay down there as long as you want, Chun. The rope will still be here when you're ready, or you can ring the bell and go get some breakfast. Your choice." Sarah looked up at the rope that had just defeated her, then at the faces of her boat crew teammates who were waiting to see what she would do. In that moment, she remembered something her father had told her during one of their training sessions in Oregon. "The moment you think you can't do something is usually the moment right before you prove you can," he had said. "The question is whether you're willing to find out." Sarah got to her feet, wiped the sand and blood from her hands, and approached the rope again. This time, she wrapped her legs around it more securely and focused on technique rather than speed. Her hands screamed in protest with every inch of upward progress, but she maintained her grip and her determination. When she reached the top of the rope and rang the bell that marked successful completion, the cheer from her boat crew was audible even over the general chaos of the training evolution. She had not just completed the obstacle. She had overcome her first major setback and proven that she could bounce back from failure. The next crisis came during the second day, during what the instructors called surf torture. The entire class was required to link arms and sit in the cold Pacific Ocean surf for an hour while waves crashed over them, and instructors shouted questions about military knowledge and SEAL history. The water temperature was 58 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause hypothermia in extended exposure. Sarah's smaller body mass meant that she lost heat faster than her larger teammates, and after 30 minutes in the surf, she was shivering so violently that she could barely speak. "Candidate Chun," Chief Williams called out, "what is the primary mission of naval special warfare?" Sarah tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering so hard that her words were unintelligible. The instructor moved closer, his expression showing what might have been concern. "If you can't answer the question, Chun, maybe you need to warm up in the medical tent," he said, offering her an easy way out of the evolution. Sarah forced her jaw to stop chattering long enough to speak clearly. "Direct action, special reconnaissance, and foreign internal defense, Chief." "Outstanding. Now give me the SEAL ethos." For the next 15 minutes, Chief Williams grilled Sarah on military knowledge while she sat in the freezing surf, her body temperature dropping to dangerous levels. But she answered every question correctly, her mind staying sharp even as her body approached its physiological limits. When the evolution finally ended and the class moved to the next training event, Sarah had to be helped out of the water by her teammates. Her core temperature had dropped low enough that she was experiencing the early stages of hypothermia, but she had refused to quit. "That was insane, Chun," Tom Bradley said as they jogged to the next evolution, the movement helping to restore circulation to Sarah's extremities. "I thought Williams was going to put you in the medical tent whether you wanted to go or not." "He was testing me," Sarah replied, her speech still slightly slurred from the cold. "He wanted to see if I would use my size as an excuse to quit. I couldn't give him that satisfaction." By the third day of Hell Week, Class 329 had been reduced to 18 candidates. 8 more had rung the bell, unable to continue with the relentless pace and physical demands. Those who remained were functioning on adrenaline, determination, and mutual support. It was during the third day that Sarah established the record that would become part of SEAL training legend. The evolution was called Around the World, a timed event where boat crews had to carry their boats from the training compound, across several miles of beach, through the water for a surf passage, and back to the starting point. Boat Crew 5 had been performing well throughout Hell Week, but they were competing against crews that included some of the strongest candidates in the class. The course record for Around the World had stood for over 10 years, set by a crew that included 2 former NFL players and an Olympic-caliber swimmer. The evolution began at 0600 hours with all remaining boat crews starting simultaneously. The first phase was a 2-mile run on soft sand with the boats carried overhead. Sarah's crew had developed an efficient rotation system that allowed them to maintain a faster pace than crews that relied solely on brute strength. The second phase required the crews to carry their boats into the surf and navigate through the breaking waves to a buoy located 500 meters offshore, then return to the beach. This was where Sarah's extensive swimming background and her crew's teamwork would prove decisive. While other crews struggled to coordinate their movements in the chaotic surf zone, Boat Crew 5 moved with the precision of a unit that had been working together for years rather than weeks. Sarah's ability to read wave patterns and time their movements allowed them to navigate the surf more efficiently than any other crew. The final phase was another beach run, but this time the crews were exhausted from the swim and the accumulated fatigue of 3 days with almost no sleep. This was where mental toughness mattered more than physical strength, and where Sarah's preparation and determination would be put to the ultimate test. As they began the final run, Boat Crew 5 was in second place, trailing the lead crew by approximately 30 seconds. The lead crew included David Morrison, a former college football linebacker, and Jake Stevens, who had been a competitive powerlifter before joining the Navy. "We can catch them," Sarah called out to her crew as they settled into their running rhythm. They went out too fast in the swim. "They're going to fade." Tom Bradley, running beside her, glanced ahead at the leading crew. "They look pretty strong to me." "Trust me," Sarah replied. "I've been watching them." Morrison's favoring his left shoulder, and Stevens has been breathing too hard since the surf passage. "They're running on pride right now, not strength." Sarah's analysis proved correct. As the two crews approached the halfway point of the final run, the lead crew's pace began to slow noticeably. The accumulation of fatigue from 3 days of Hell Week was catching up with them, and their early fast pace was costing them dearly. "Now," Sarah called out to her crew, "this is where we make our move." Boat Crew 5 increased their pace gradually, drawing alongside the lead crew with 800 meters remaining in the evolution. The two crews ran side by side for several minutes, neither willing to give ground in what had become a battle of wills as much as a test of physical capability. With 400 meters to go, Sarah made a decision that would be remembered in SEAL training history. Despite being exhausted from 3 days of continuous training, despite being the smallest member of her crew, and despite carrying the weight of representing all women in military special operations, she found another gear. "Follow me," she called out to her crew, and increased her pace to what felt like an all-out sprint despite the heavy boat overhead and the soft sand beneath their feet. Her crew responded immediately, matching her pace and pulling ahead of the competition in the final stretch. They crossed the finish line 6 seconds ahead of the second-place crew, establishing a new course record and proving that teamwork and determination could overcome raw physical advantage. But the most remarkable aspect of their performance was revealed when Chief Williams announced the official time. Boat Crew 5 had not just broken the 10-year-old record, they had shattered it by over 2 minutes, completing around the world faster than any crew in the history of SEAL training. The final phase of Hell Week arrived with Friday morning's dawn, bringing with it the most challenging evolution of the entire ordeal, the infamous So Solly Day. Named after a particularly demanding instructor from the program's early history, this evolution was designed to push candidates beyond what they believed were their absolute limits. Only 14 candidates remained from the original 32 who had started Class 329. Hell Week had claimed 12 more, leaving a core group of determined individuals who had proven they possessed the mental and physical toughness required for SEAL operations. Sarah stood with the survivors on the beach as Chief Williams explained the final challenge. Her body showed the toll of 4 days with virtually no sleep. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands were raw and bandaged, and her uniform was stained with mud, salt, and blood. But her posture remained erect, and her attention focused. "This is your final test," Chief Williams announced. "You will complete a series of timed evolutions designed to simulate combat conditions. Boat races, obstacle courses, tactical scenarios, and physical challenges that will push every one of you to your breaking point. Some of you will discover that you have more left in the tank than you thought. Others will discover their limits." The first evolution was a boat race that would take the remaining candidates around a triangular course marked by buoys in the ocean, approximately 3 miles of hard paddling in rough seas. The 2 remaining boat crews would be competing not just against each other, but against exhaustion, hypothermia, and the psychological pressure of being so close to completing Hell Week. Boat Crew 5 now consisted of only 5 members: Sarah, Tom Bradley, Mike Rodriguez, James Park, and David Kim. 2 of their original crew had been eliminated earlier in Hell Week, forcing the remaining members to work even harder to move their boat efficiently. As they carried their boat into the surf for the final race, Sarah felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her body was operating on reserves she did not know she possessed, but her mind was clearer than it had been since Hell Week began. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. Same strategy as always, she told her crew as they positioned their boat in the surf. Steady pace for the first 2 legs. Then, we see what we have left for the final sprint to the finish. The race began with both crews paddling hard toward the first buoy, their boats cutting through 4-foot swells that made every stroke a battle against the ocean itself. The other crew, led by Jake Stevens and David Morrison, took an early lead by maintaining a punishing pace that would have been unsustainable under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. This was Hell Week, where normal rules did not apply and where success depended on finding strength in places you did not know existed. As they rounded the first buoy, Boat Crew 5 trailed by approximately 50 meters. The gap was significant, but not insurmountable, and Sarah could see that the lead crew was already showing signs of the strain from their aggressive early pace. "They're burning out," she called to her crew over the sound of waves and heavy breathing. "Maintain our pace. We'll start closing the gap on the second leg." Sarah's prediction proved accurate. As the 2 boats made their way toward the second buoy, the lead crew's stroke rate began to slow noticeably. Jake Stevens, who had been setting the pace for his crew, was showing clear signs of exhaustion, his powerful strokes becoming less efficient with each passing minute. Meanwhile, Boat Crew 5 maintained their steady rhythm, their synchronized paddling eating away at the lead with every stroke. By the time they rounded the second buoy, the gap had closed to less than 20 meters. "This is it," Sarah announced to her crew. "Everything we have left. All the way to the finish." The final leg of the race became an epic battle between 2 exhausted crews who refused to give in. Both boats increased their stroke rates despite the accumulated fatigue of 4 days of continuous training. The ocean seemed to sense the drama, providing a following sea that allowed both crews to maintain speeds that would have been impossible in calm water. With 200 meters to go, the 2 boats were virtually even, neither crew able to gain a decisive advantage. Spectators on the beach could hear the grunts of exertion and the splash of paddles as 14 of the toughest military candidates in the country gave everything they had in pursuit of victory. It was at this moment that Sarah made a decision that would become part of SEAL training legend. Despite being the smallest member of her crew, despite having been awake for over 90 hours, and despite being pushed far beyond what anyone thought possible, she found a final reserve of strength. "Follow my stroke," she called out to her crew, and increased her paddle rate to a pace that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Her crew responded immediately, matching her stroke for stroke as their boat pulled ahead of the competition in the final 100 meters. The finish line was clearly visible, marked by instructors on the beach with flags and stopwatches. Boat Crew 5 crossed the finish line 3 boat lengths ahead of their competition, completing not just a victory in the final race of Hell Week, but the culmination of an extraordinary week of performance that had shattered expectations and established new standards. As they paddled their boat onto the beach and collapsed in the sand, Sarah felt a sense of completion that went beyond physical exhaustion. She had not just survived Hell Week, she had dominated it. More importantly, she had proven that excellence in military special operations was not determined by gender, but by character, determination, and the willingness to push beyond perceived limitations. Chief Williams approached the crew with the traditional Hell Week completion ceremony. Each candidate who had survived the ordeal would receive their brown T-shirt, symbolizing their successful completion of the most challenging phase of SEAL training. "Class 329, he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the beach. "You have successfully completed Hell Week. 14 of you started this week, and 14 of you finished it. That is the lowest attrition rate in the history of this program, and it speaks to the quality of the individuals in this class. As he called each candidate forward to receive their brown shirt, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From an intelligence specialist in Afghanistan to the first woman to complete SEAL Hell Week, the path had been long and difficult, but every challenge had been worth it. Petty Officer Sarah Chun, Chief Williams called out, his voice carrying a note of respect that had not been there at the beginning of training. As Sarah stepped forward to receive her brown shirt, Chief Williams looked her directly in the eyes. Chun, your performance this week has been outstanding. You have set records, led your team to victory, and proven that determination and skill are more important than size or gender. You represent the best of what this program is designed to produce. He handed her the brown shirt and continued, but more than that, you have changed this program forever. Every woman who comes after you will have a path to follow because of what you've accomplished here. That is a responsibility I know you will carry with honor. Sarah accepted the shirt and responded with the crisp military bearing that had characterized her throughout training. Thank you, Chief. It's been an honor to train with the best. As the ceremony concluded and the candidates prepared for a brief rest before continuing with the remaining phases of SEAL training, word of Sarah's achievements was already spreading far beyond the training compound at Coronado. Phone calls were being made to Pentagon offices, where senior military leaders were discussing the implications of her success. Media outlets were preparing stories about the historic breakthrough in military special operations. And, most importantly, young women across the country were learning that a new path had been opened for them. But, for Sarah, the most meaningful recognition came from her fellow candidates. As they gathered their gear and prepared to move to the next phase of training, Tom Bradley spoke for the entire group. Chun, I want you to know that we didn't make it through Hell Week with a woman on our team, he said. We made it through Hell Week with the toughest teammate any of us have ever had. Gender had nothing to do with it. Mike Rodriguez, the former Marine who had initially been skeptical about women in special operations, nodded his agreement. I've served with a lot of tough people over the years. You're at the top of that list, and it's not even close. As they walked away from the beach where they had spent the most challenging week of their lives, Sarah reflected on what they had accomplished together. She had not just broken barriers, she had shattered them completely. The 10-year-old record that had stood as a testament to peak physical performance had been decisively beaten by a team that refused to accept limitations. More importantly, she had proven that the integration of women into military special operations was not just possible, but could actually enhance performance when the focus remained on merit and capability rather than preconceived notions about gender roles. The remaining phases of SEAL training would present their own challenges. Dive phase, land warfare, and advanced tactical training all lay ahead. But Sarah knew that the hardest part was behind her. She had proven she belonged, and now she could focus on becoming the best SEAL operator possible. As Class 329 entered the next phase of their journey toward earning the SEAL Trident, Sarah carried with her not just the satisfaction of personal achievement, but the knowledge that she had opened a door that would never be closed again. Every woman who followed would have a path cleared by her determination and success. The question, "Can I give it a shot?" had been answered definitively. The chuckles from SEALs who doubted her capabilities had been replaced by respect and admiration from the same warriors who now considered her their equal. Sarah Chun had not just completed SEAL training. She had transformed it forever, proving that true warriors are defined not by their physical characteristics, but by the strength of their character and their refusal to accept defeat. The naval special warfare community would never be the same, and that was exactly how it should be. Excellence, after all, knows no boundaries except those imposed by courage, determination, and the willingness to push beyond what others believe is possible. In the years that followed, when new candidates asked about the records posted on the training compound walls, instructors would tell them about the small woman from Oregon who came to SEAL training and showed everyone what was possible when talent met opportunity and determination refused to yield to doubt. Her legacy would not be that she was the first woman to complete SEAL training, but that she did it better than almost anyone who had come before her, setting a standard of excellence that future candidates of all backgrounds would aspire to achieve. As they set down their boat and collapsed on the sand, gasping for air, Sarah felt a satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had not just survived Hell Week, she had excelled in it. She had proven that a woman could not only keep up with the most elite military training program in the world, but could lead it. Chief Williams approached the crew with his characteristic stern expression, but Sarah could see something different in his eyes. It might have been respect, or it might have been amazement, but it was definitely recognition that what he had just witnessed was extraordinary. Outstanding performance, Crew 5, he announced. Chun, that final push was exactly what leadership looks like under pressure. You saw an opportunity, you took it, and you brought your team with you. That's what we're looking for in a SEAL operator. As word of the record spread through the training compound and beyond, Sarah realized that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer the woman trying to prove she belonged in SEAL training. She was a candidate who happened to be a woman, setting standards that other candidates would aspire to meet. But Hell Week was not over, and the hardest challenges were still ahead. Exertion of training, earning the respect of these men, warriors who had dedicated their lives to excellence in military service, meant more to her than any individual record or achievement. But even as she savored this moment of acceptance, Sarah knew that the real tests were still ahead. They were only 3 weeks into a 6-month program, and the most challenging phases, Hell Week, Dive Phase, and Advanced Tactical Training, lay ahead. She also knew that word of her performance was traveling up the chain of command and drawing attention from outside the training compound. Phone calls were being made in Pentagon offices, and policy decisions were being influenced by daily reports from Coronado. As she lay in her bunk that night, Sarah thought about the conversation she had had with her father before leaving for training. He had warned her that success would bring its own challenges, that some people would try to minimize her achievements or claim that standards had been lowered to accommodate her. When you prove them wrong, and you will prove them wrong, some of them will try to move the goalposts, he had told her. Your job is to keep moving those goalposts back where they belong, one day at a time. Sarah smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, and new chances to show that excellence knew no gender boundaries. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And she was just getting started. As clipboard, and then, at Sarah, who was calmly stretching her shoulders as if she had just completed a routine workout rather than a record-breaking performance. The other candidates looked at her with a mixture of respect, amazement, and, in some cases, intimidation. This was not what any of them had expected when they learned that a woman would be joining their class. As they moved toward the next phase of training, the whispers began. Word spread quickly through the compound that the woman in Class 329 had not just kept up with the men, she had dominated them. Phone calls were made to Pentagon offices, and emails were sent to senior Navy leadership. Sarah Chun had just announced her presence in the most dramatic way possible. She had shattered assumptions, broken records, and proven that she belonged among the most elite warriors in the American military. But this was just day one. The real tests lay ahead, and everyone knew that what they had witnessed was only the beginning of what would become one of the most closely watched training cycles in SEAL history. Chief Williams made a note in his training log that evening. Candidate Chin exceeded all expectations. Physical performance outstanding. Mental toughness evident. Recommend continued observation and appropriate challenge level adjustment. What he did not write, but what he was beginning to suspect, was that Class 329 might be witnessing something unprecedented in the history of Navy SEAL training. Sarah Chun was not just surviving, she was thriving, and that was going to change everything. As she unpacked her gear in the Stark barracks room, Sarah allowed herself one moment of doubt. What if she was not strong enough? What if she was not fast enough? What if the critics were right, and she simply did not belong here? Then, she remembered the feel of bullets flying over her head in Afghanistan, the weight of responsibility when her teammates counted on her, and the pride in Lieutenant Commander Torres's voice when he recommended her for this opportunity. She was here because she had earned it. She was here because she belonged. And she was going to prove it, one day at a time, one evolution at a time, until there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. The next morning would bring her first real test, and Sarah Chun was ready to meet it head-on.